Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Jay, here to talk about the life, legacy, and remembering the late great Big Punisher, aka Big Pun, aka Christopher Lee Rios, aka one of the best rappers of all time. It is 22 years. It was 22 years on February the 7th that we lost the late great Big Punisher, and his name and his likeness have been floating around since February the 20th, February the 7th, in terms of controversy surrounding him and surrounding his estate and his assets and how he was treated by people in his musical camp, particularly Fat Joe, and particularly the dispute between Fat Joe, the Terror Squad, his fans, represented by YouTuber Hassan Campbell, and Fat Joe. Many people feel that Fat Joe did not honor Big Pun uh, sufficiently. Felt that he does, since he doesn't put Big Pun's son on, and he don't give Big Pun's son a record deal, Chris Rivers, that he's not honoring he and Remy Ma, two people that he owes him a tremendous debt. Joe put him on, yes, that's true, but he took Joe's music to another level. Joe was not, and Joe even admits this in interviews. Joe was not mainstream at the time that um, before Punk came out. When he came out with Jealous One's Envy in 1995, Joe was an underground rapper. He was affiliated with Digging in the Crates crew, Showing AG, Big L's crew, and he came out with some songs. But when he got on there with Big Pun in 1998, that's when Pun blew the roof off the place with the Capital Punishment album. Don't Want to Be a Player and Don't Want to Be a Player No More, the remix with Joe the Singer. And he climbed to number 5 on the charts, and he revolutionized the game. Thing is, before Big Pun, Latinos really weren't getting on in the rap game, even though Latinos have been in hip hop since the beginning. Obviously, hip hop coming about in the Bronx in the mid to late 70s. Of course, Latinos were there. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Bronx was predominantly Latinos. There was Latino breakdancing crews like the Black Study Crew, famous breakdancers like Crazy Legs. There was Latinos like Ruby D in the game, Charlie Chase of the Cold Crush Brothers. But in terms of mainstream appeal, Latinos had a hard time. You did have like um, Rico Suave, an Ecuadorian Geraldo, an Ecuadorian rapper. You had Kid Frost from the West Coast, kind of coming with that West Coast Chicano sound, and of course he had Fat Joe. But it was really hard for Latinos at that time, in the early days of hip hop, to stamp their way as rappers. And the other elements of hip hop, the graffiti game, the breakdancing game, the DJing game, like Charlie Chase, it was pretty good and well established. But in terms of rap, those kind of other rappers that I mentioned, they was kind of niche. They only appealed to that specific niche. Enrico Suave was only like the Spanish rappers. Chicano rap was only just Chicano music. But Pun broke through that barrier and he went platinum. So he took Joe's music to another level. So a lot of the fans felt that Joe owes him a little bit more. That Joe owes him a lot more and should put his son on, who Big Pun's son is very nice in the rap game. You know what I mean? He has just as much lyrical ability as his father, if not more so. And Fat Joe went on was it not Nori? He went on some podcast, I forget who, and he comes out and says, "Oh, all the Big Pun fans, all the bums on YouTube, you know, they only know half the story. And they're telling me that I should do this for Big Pun's son, I should do that for Big Pun's son." And then Hassan Campbell gets on DJ Academics podcast, and he says basically he challenges Fat Joe. Tell me a picture, show me a picture of yourself and Big Pun's son, or Remy Ma, show me a picture of yourself and Big Pun's son. And then Fat Joe responds on the day of Big Pun's passing in a very loud interview, very loud. Um, that he doesn't have any explaining to do, that he did the right thing according to Eliza Rios. But, the proof is in the pudding. It is what it is. Well, let's talk a little bit about the legacy of Big Pun. I remember, and I would like to talk personally, when I remember about when I was first introduced to his music. And when I was first introduced to his music was 1998. The Capital Punishment album. I didn't hear Firewater. I didn't hear none of the features that he was on before that. I went back retrospectively and heard it later. But I was first introduced to his music in 1998. And his music just blew me away, not only because he was Puerto Rican like me, and he was representing for Boricuas in the rap game, but also because of his lyrical ability. He was a lyrical beast. Going back to the cover that he did, him and Fat Joe did a cover of a song that was on the Deep Cover sound. A lot of covers, right? The Deep Cover soundtrack uh, that Snoop and Dr. Dre did. So Big Pun and Fat Joe did a cover of it, and I feel like Deep Cover 1998, Twins 1998, is a better version of that song than the original version that Snoop and Dre did. And on that song, Big Pun says this line: "Then in the middle of Little Italy, little did we know that we riddled him middleman who didn't do diddly." And when I heard that line, I was just like, "Yo, I never heard nobody have this kind of flow." And for a man this size, it was incredible. The man was like 600, 700, 500, 600 pounds, and he was just his breath control and his ability to hold his breath while rapping so tremendously fast and to stay on beat was incredible. He was a lyrical monster. He was a lyrical beast. He was part of that underground movement in hip hop that included the Wu-Tang Clan, included Mobb Deep, Loud Records, Steve Rifkin's label. So they redefined this song, this deep cover song. 187 on an undercover cop. Fat Joe and Big Pun redefined this deep cover song. And it's very hard to do a version of another person's song because your version of that song is going to be completely different. They're going to put their spin on it, especially Joe and Pun being from the East Coast, and that was a West Coast song. So they put their spin on it. And then other songs on the album, like uh, the two versions of I'm Not a Player. The first version, I'm Not a Player, the original one, and then the one with Joe, which blew up the charts in the summer of 1998. It was incredible. Boricua, Morena, really, it was a party jam, and you heard it everywhere you went. Then he would do a lot of features on a lot of other people's albums, like the Horse and Carriage remix with Silk the Shaka, Banned from TV in 1998 with the Locks and Cameron and Nori. Uh, Incredible beat. Anybody that freestyle back in the day, that was one of the beats we always uh, used. Pun would just kill it. Fantastic Four on the first DJ Clue album in 1999 when he was with Cannabis and Cameron and Nori. Nori and them teamed up a lot. On the Run Eaton, him and Nori. We Came Up, him and Nori. That was on his first album. That was a classic album. He really didn't do a lot of features on the first album. It was just mainly Nori. And then moving on to 1999, he did the Terror Squad album. Now, the Terror Squad album was their first collaboration album. It was Pun's crew. His Pun's crew originally was full Eclipse crew. It was him, Triple Sace, and Cuban Link. And they were the full Eclipse crew. First, they were the Caribbean Connection. They were the full Eclipse crew. And then that was back when Pun's name was, uh, Pun's rap name was Big Moondog. He got rid of the Big Moondog. He became Big Punisher after the Marvel comic character, Frank Castle. And from there, they changed their name from the Caribbean Connection to the Full Eclipse crew. Then they hooked up with Joe. Obviously, he started freestyling for Joe, like I said. Joe puts him on, and those guys become part of the Terror Squad along with Prospect, Armageddon, and Joe. Prospect, um, I believe Prospect was already with Joe, and I know Armageddon was already with Joe. But Pun brings in Cuban Link and Triple Sace. Now they do the Terror Squad album in 1999. Pun's featured on a couple of songs on that album. Famously, people remember the one him in the basketball court. What you gonna do when Pun comes knocking at your front door and you want more? That one. Um, that was pretty cool, you know. And then in 2000, his second studio album, Yeah Baby. Yeah Baby, I liked a lot of tracks from them, but that was when he really started to have a lot of his troubles, with his weight. His weight had ballooned to like 700, 800. He was already big when he came in 98, but by 2000, his weight had gotten out of control. It was crazy with Pun because he had a lot of emotional problems stemming from the fact that when he was a child, his mom had some struggles, and in Flowers for the Dead, when he passed away, Cuban Link mentions how he used to eat rocks, you know, and but he was a very intelligent man. One of the songs that I love from him, the John Blaze album, which is on Fat Joe's second album, the Don Cartagena album, which Big Pun wrote most of that album. But on the John Blaze song with Jada Kiss, um, Nas, Fat Pun, Joe, Nas, Jada Kiss, and Raekwon, there's a heavy combination for you. Uh, Grand Imperial College material, known to blow out your brain minerals. Even if I stuttered, I would still shit on you. You know, he used such big words in his raps, that it was unbelievable. But his family said, you know, that he used to read whole encyclopedias and whole dictionaries and whole thesauruses in order to gain a better understanding of rap. You know what I mean? Of wordplay. He was a tremendous wordsmith. So even though he had these emotional problems as a kid, he was because he had he was still intelligent, he was still introspective, he was still smart. Because of emotional problems as a kid, though, um, it manifested in him using food as a coping mechanism, especially when he sued the city from an accident that happened to him when he was a kid, and then he got this lawsuit, and then after that, subsequently after that, he got into the rap game. So getting a lot of money, getting a lot of resources, allowed him to, overindulge when it came to food, and he would eat his feelings away, and he would deal with his feelings in a similar way that people deal with their feelings with drugs and alcohol. Alcoholics or drug addicts might self medicate and try to get rid of their feelings through drugs and alcohol. He used food and the dopamines released in the brain through eating, especially food high in fat and high in carbohydrates, to overly overly indulge himself and cover up some of his past scars, past emotional scars that shit he was dealing with, in his early childhood life, being abused by his stepfather physically, because stepfather was in the military, his mom's drugs use, and emotional problems stemming from his life. So his success was a curse to him in a way because he didn't know how to deal with a lot of that excess. He didn't know how to deal, in a sense, with a lot of the problems he was. And he would resort to overeating in order, being an emotional eater, using food uh, to make himself feel better, to make himself feel good. As a food that was as a drug, basically. And that led to a lot of problems. And you notice on the second album, uh, he was he didn't have as much breath control. He was really struggling on a lot of the songs on Yeah Baby. You could hear him running out of breath a lot. He did go to a fat farm, and one of the saddest things in the song he did with Donnell Jones, It's So Hard, one of the saddest things about that is that he went to the fat farm and he lost 100 pounds, and he was trying to live and he was trying to get better. But also, he had a lot of people around him that were negative. He had a lot of people around him that were yes men. They would do what he would say. And apparently, he was very, just like a lot of other famous people that deal with problems, whether it be drugs, alcohol, gambling, a lot of vices. They deal with these problems. And the people around him were real toxic. They wouldn't tell him. They would go into the fat farm and they would sneak him bars and they would sneak him, junk food, and they would give him stuff that he wasn't supposed to have. It was a lot of. It was very similar to Yokozuna. We heard the stories on Bruce Pitcher's podcast about Yokozuna when he went into the fat farm, and it didn't really work for him because of the same thing. Because he was a famous person, because he was a celebrity, people would bend the rules for him. They would bring in junk food, they would sneak in hamburgers, hot dogs, candy, whatever. And, you know, good morning, Lisa. And instead of losing weight, and dealing with your issues because you're famous. People make accommodations for you in a way they wouldn't make with regular clients. Just like with Yoko, same thing. You know what I mean? Like the Fat Farm didn't work for him for Pun because he he was allowed to bend the rules, not allowed to, but he was able to bend the rules in a way that if you or I went in there, we wouldn't be allowed to bend the rules because we're nobodies, and the people, the staff there, the people that work there, are not gonna sneak us food in. They're not gonna allow our friends to sneak us food in, our supposed friends, and we're not gonna get better. In fact, we're gonna come back worse because they feel like, oh, we're celebrities, so we should be allowed to get what we want, and they don't get better. They just get worse. And it's just like with Yoko. Uh, that's what happened to Pun. He didn't have control of his eating habits at all. And somebody that, just like with Yoko, they would say, well, he's so good at what he's doing with, despite his size. It's amazing that he's this big and he's able to have this breast control. He's able to have this flow. Just like they would say with Yoko, where, oh, he's so good, he's so big, but he's agile and he's able to jump high and he's able to, um, do these wrestling moves. But look how big he is. So he was a phenomenon in the way that he was able to rap. Like I just said, dead in the middle of Little Italy. Little do we know that we riddled the middleman who didn't do diddly. He didn't take one breath in those verses, and he was a 500-pound man. But it got to be so much that on the second album, you could see him struggling. You could see him at shows running out of breath. He couldn't perform for very long hours, not even an hour, so he would have to sit down because he got to be so big. His eating habit just got out of control. And his friends weren't helping him. They were too busy being yes men or yes women. You know what I mean? They were like, oh, well, he had a way of, he was persuasive. He had a way of talking about it. And they want to kiss his ass, and give him whatever the hell he wants because he's rich and they see him as their meal ticket, but really they're hurting him. So even though he was so good, his weight got to be such an issue that eventually, despite how good he was, it eventually started to affect his work. And by the second album, that becomes evidently clear. Not that the second album doesn't have good songs on it. It does. 100% is a fantastic song, especially for Puerto Ricans. It samples Hector Lavoe, a Puerto Rican musical legend's music, and it was the jam in the 1999 Puerto Rican Day Parade. So Pun was always out there representing for his Puerto Rican heritage, for the Bronx. Never left the Bronx. He stayed in the hood despite being a rich and famous celebrity. Um, and one thing too that I noticed in a lot of documentaries, a lot of interviews that people do about him, is he was a prankster. There's a famous story, and Remy Ma tells this on Fat Joe's podcast. Tells this story. Um, Pun is in there recording his second album, the Yeah Baby album, and he's like on the third floor, and Michael Jackson's studio is on the floor up top, the above floor, and Pun is calling in, prank calling, prank calling Michael Jackson's studio over and over, calling and hanging up and calling and doing different voices, trying to play a joke on MJ. you know. Another funny story And Nori tells this story when Pun was obviously Nori. Of course, we know that he's a 5%er, which is something like a Muslim, and we know that since the war report, right? And he doesn't eat pork, right? When Pun and Nori would hang out, Pun to tease him would order something pork, and make Nori smell it, like with his pork chops or whatever, and make Nori smell it. Like, I know you can't eat it, but I'm gonna just make you smell it to tease you. So Pun be the type to play practical jokes, like prank calling MJ Studios or teasing Nori about his religion or his way of life, you know, taunting Nori. He's just a practical jokester. Um, and all the stories you hear about him, it's like, damn, he would have been cool to be around. He was funny. You see pictures of him in the limo, uh, rapping and freestyling. One famous one is is him, DMX, Cannabis, Most Def, and they're all freestyling, around him. Pun is killing it. Pun, whenever he was in a cipher, was killing it in the rap game. So, yeah. Um, and about the controversy. The controversy centers around two things. One, like I said in the beginning of the video, a lot of the fans feel that what Fat Joe did was messed up. They feel like after the death of Big Pun died the day after performing on Saturday Night Live. He had a song with J Lo. Matter of fact, that the MJ story, that was the song they were recording, not a song on Yeah Baby. My mistake. They were recording the J Lo song, the Fat Joe song, right? J Lo himself and Fat Joe, they did the song on Saturday Night Live. Pun went up to his hotel room in 2000, and he wasn't breathing. He was choking, and he had a heart attack. So after his heart attack, Endangered Species came out a couple of years after, and then all of a sudden we started hearing these stories that Fat Joe was no longer giving his family the royalties that they would deserve, and eventually they ended up in a New York City shelter and destitute. And Fat Joe would say a lot of, and during this time, Fat Joe was starting to ascend to the heights of the music industry. You know what I mean? He was starting to become more and more commercial. When Pun was alive, it was all about uh, Pun. Pun was more popular than Fat Joe. Pun was better than Fat Joe. Now Pun is gone, and all of a sudden Fat Joe is making songs with Ashanti. He's making Lean Back. He's doing his thing because he figured out the formula to become commercial. And we're hearing stories that Pun's family's not eating. Pun's family's out there in a New York City shelter, destitute, and we're seeing Fat Joe rise and rise and rise in popularity, rise and rise in status, and also J Lo, who Pun giving her his cosign was big in the 90s because she was just an actress. She wasn't in music, but he gave her his cosign, and That was one of her biggest hits on the six in her 1999 on the six album. So um, but specifically Fat Joe, because many people feel that Fat Joe owes Big Pun because even though it was Joe that put Pun on, uh, uh, it was Pun that made Joe pop. You know, so people feel that's fucked up. People feel that uh, Pun's family was out in the cold, literally, and Joe wasn't doing nothing to help him out. Also, Remy Ma. Remy Ma became popular. Remy Ma now on Love and Hip Hop. And when they did Big Pun's street dedication last year, Fat Joe wasn't there. Fat Joe wasn't there. Remy Ma wasn't there, and J Lo wasn't there. Three people that Pun considered them as his brothers and sisters. Pun would do anything for these three individuals, and neither one of them was there. Neither one of them cares about his family. Neither one of them did anything for his family. How you gonna how you gonna say you love me and I was your brother to J Lo, Remy Ma, and Fat Joe, and okay, I'm your brother, but what about your brother's family? No, aren't you your brother's keeper? You know what I mean? Like it was just foul to the fans. I mean, all three of those individuals worked hard. All three of those individuals are successful. All three of those individuals, achieved stuff on their own merit. But you have to believe that uh, they kind of do owe Pun's family, just in the same way that Biggie, Puff holds Biggie down. You know what I mean? Puff holds Biggie down, even though Big was Puff was out before Big, and Big put Puff. I mean, Puff put Big on, and not the other way around. But Puff still holds his family down, still gives all his royalties to Biggie's children, to Biggie's mother. Why doesn't Fat Joe do the same thing? Why doesn't Fat Joe honor Pun in the way that Puffy, P. Diddy honors Biggie? You know, because you wasn't popping when before I blessed you, before Fat Joe met Big Pun, he was nobody. It was just like with Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. Yeah, Elijah Muhammad existed before Malcolm X and probably was Malcolm X's teacher, but the organization, the group, whatever, it wasn't popping, it wasn't popular before uh, you know, Malcolm put his skills to it. So it was the same thing like with Pun. Before Pun put his skills to test with Terror Squad was nobody. Nobody was checking for Terror Squad at all. You know what I mean? So Joe does owe the family of Big Pun. He does owe Big Pun's son um, a contract, in my opinion. He's saying here that uh, Big Pun doesn't, Big Pun's son doesn't want to sign with him. Maybe that's true because Baby Pun's son, maybe Chris Rivers wants to achieve something on his own, outside of his father. That could be possible. But the fans still feel, a lot of the fans still feel that, and I'm one of them, that he should do something more for the Rios family. There's a lot of bad blood between himself and the Rios family over that. How they feel like uh, Joe should have did more. I mean, Joe rudely telling Liza Rios to get a job. When her and that family was in the shelter. Come on, Joe. And another controversy stems over the 2002 documentary with regards to Liza, where she reveals some of Pun's dirty laundry, some of things about Pun and her's relationship. They were together since they were 14. Keep that in mind. Some things about their relationship that was a little bit unsavory, particularly the video where Big Pun was Big Pun pistol whipped her, right? He hit her with a gun. And a lot of fans feel that even though that was the reality that happened, he had a lot of anger issues that he dealt with through food, right? That he shouldn't have done that. And painting him in that light will forever paint him as a domestic abuser, as a woman beater. The incident, according to the documentary, was he couldn't find something. He got angry with her. It was something that his sister Nicole, his husband Hector, had hid away, and he couldn't find whatever he was looking for. And he got mad at Liza and pistol whipped her. And she also paints the picture in the documentary that he, that he had them family trapped in the house. He wouldn't let them go nowhere. And sometimes he would put on boxing matches between he would he would put on these boxing matches between his son Chris and his daughter Star and his daughter Vanessa, and he would have them box until they bled. You know what I mean? So things like that, we don't know if it's true as fans, allegedly, but things like that besmirch the legacy of Big Pun. Yeah, they're a part of his history, they're a part of his reality. But as I said on other videos, I didn't know the man personally. I don't know if any of this stuff is true. This is what we hear in documentaries. This is all allegedly. But what I know about him and how he affected my life, he affected me because me as a Puerto Rican, New Yorker, he made me want to rap. He made me want to write rhymes. When I heard that line in Twins '98, the Deep Cover song, I wanted to be just like him. You know, I wanted to be on his level. So he inspired me in a lot of ways. Um, his size, his swag, his ability. I didn't know nothing about growing up listening to his music about the personal stuff. I learned about it later after he died. You know what I mean? So it doesn't really affect me. And again, I always believe that people are not perfect. You know what I mean? There's good and bad in every individual. And I can't say what he had done allegedly to his wife and to his family was right, if that's true. But again, we're here for the music. We're here for the art. We're here for that thing. We're not here for his personal life. Obviously, abusing women, never good. You know what I mean? But her putting it out there did put a black spot on his name. Pun did perform at a WrestleMania pre-show in 1999 at WrestleMania 15, and he was also there at WrestleMania 15, which he mentions in his lyrics in Philly. And in the WrestleMania show, the WrestleMania 15 review show that Bruce Pritchard and Conrad do, Bruce Pritchard talks about it. You see photos of the Terror Squad, and even there, and Shane McMahon in the background like this, right? He was Shane McMahon. Shane has always been a hip hop fan. He's always been a hip hop head. He always appreciated hip hop. So Pump did perform at that WrestleMania pre-show party and was there. But even Bruce Pritchard tells Conrad in the review show The review of that, uh, in the WrestleMania 15 review where they talk about it, um, mentions that Big Pun was so big at that time they couldn't even get up the stairs. But Pun was a huge wrestling fan. He referenced Ted DiBiase in one of his songs, and it's so hard. He mentions uh, iced out like Dibiase. He had a couple beefs here and there in his life, especially with 50 Cent. After 50 Cent's first song, How to Rob, uh, and Dance with the Devil on his second album, he mentions to this 50 Cent rapper, very funny, get your nut off. In real life, you don't know I'll blow your motherfucking head off. Oh, yeah. So he had some beefs, and he had, of course, a famous beef with Jay Z. Allegedly, according to Cuban Link, there was an incident where the Rockefeller dudes met the Terror Squad dudes, and Pun hit one of the Rockefeller dudes in the head with a bottle. you know, you know what I mean? And was chasing uh, Jay Z and the Rockefeller dudes around. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stories out there with Big Pun. I would like to see a Big Pun um, biopic movie, a movie about his life, you know, and how he changed the game for Latinos and changed the game for uh, Puerto Ricans. Yeah, the song with J Lo was called "Feeling So Good." I was just looking up that song, "Feeling So Good," and that was the song he was doing on that SNL episode. When he passed away. But I would love to see a biopic about his because he was kind of like Selena. The thing that reminds me kind of like him and Selena was that Selena was doing English music at a time when they didn't want Latinos to do English music. Same with Pun. And Terror Squad and him would say this in a lot of interviews. They would say that, people with executives, record executives and stuff, especially on Atlantic, Joe's label, would ask them, you know, why they don't rap in Spanish, why only in English. So they were just like with Selena, she was trying to open doors for Latinos in English music. She was doing it on the R&B and pop side. He was doing it on the hip hop side. He even did speaking of reaching out with the Latino audience, he even did a remix, him and Cuban Link, with a remix of Living La Vida Loca. It's on the Endangered Species album. So he did a lot. Caribbean Connection with Wyclef is one of my favorite songs. Um, 19, 1998, 1999, 2000, he was all over. Big Punisher, aka Chris Rios. Rest in peace, man. You were a big inspiration to me. You represented New York. You held down your crown. 360. Uh, he was the best that ever did it, coming from the Latino point of view. He took the swag, the Triz name, funny skit with him and Funkmaster Flex on his first album. Yeah, but I'll never forget, where I was when I heard the news in 2000. I went to school the next day. So many people that I used to chill with, which is from the Bronx. This girl, Shanice, Jimmy, this kid, Jimmy. Um, uh, this girl Stephanie. You know what I mean? They were all big pun fans. I was a big pun fan, so we were all feeling kind of somber that day in 2000 when we heard the news. But yeah, rest in peace to Big Pun, a legend in the rap game, and I would love to see a biopic about him. But the problem I think would be is the size of the man. How do you get a man that size to play, him? you know, but that looks like him. But I'm sure there's people out there, you know what I mean, giving young actors a chance. But I would love to see it. Rest in peace to Big Pun, a legend, one of the best that ever did it. The greatest, was a huge Terror Squad fan back in the 90s. They had me bumping the Don Cartagena album for months and months when it first came out. When it first came out, and I didn't even really like Fat Joe before that. But Pun wrote most of it. And 1998, from 1998 to 2000, he was indeed my favorite rapper and still remains on my top five to this day. Peace. Love you guys. Thank you for contributing. Um, and love you. Love all of y'all. Peace. Rest in peace, Big Pun. And about the controversy, the Hassan Campbell controversy with Fat Joe, I just think, you know, fans don't know all the story. They don't really know the whole story. People like Hassan Campbell and stuff. Yeah, they lived in the Bronx, but they don't really. They wasn't, you know, there with Pun in the studio. It wasn't around them. They just going on what they hear on interviews and documentaries and stuff like that. So trying to come at Fat Joe, yeah, people might feel it's fucked up what Joe did, right? But they don't know the whole story. There's different stories out there. So how can they really judge it? Peace.